Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets, powered by FTN right here on Game Plus Network. I'm your host, Chris Meaney. Thanks, as always, for taking the time to hang out here today on this Monday. Hopefully, everybody had a fantastic Sunday. Fantasy football wins. We still got one more game. Yes, I say wins because I know you're in multiple leagues out there. Multiple leagues. Any questions at any point at Chris Meaney, if you're following along here on my Twitter account, please don't hesitate to reach out. We can answer some starter sit questions. And by we, I mean, I will be joined by the great Joe Pisapia. He is a host of several shows over at Fantasy Pros and Sports Grid, and also the author of the Fantasy Black Book series. We'll get his thoughts on week two, some week two takeaways. I have a few as well that I'll, bring up here at the top of the show. And we'll talk about waiver wire stuff, as we will every single Monday on this show. And I'll be honest, the running backs are pretty slim. Like, two of the top 5 dropped running backs last week are now probably going to be the most added this week. And Sony Michel, I believe we talked with Tino about that Sony Michel was one of the most dropped backs and probably now one of the most picked up for the next 24, 48 hours or so, depending on when your waivers do run. And also, who was it? There's another running back. Teaser. Who is it? We'll just have to wait. You'll just have to hang out and wait. Actually, it's kind of slipping my mind. Like, let's see who it is. James White was a guy that was dropped a lot. Michael Carter was a guy that was dropped a lot. Zach Moss is the other one. Zach Moss was the most dropped player in fantasy football after week 1. He doesn't have a spectacular week 2, but he did find the end zone twice. It's a very Zach Moss line, if you haven't come across the line that he had yesterday in that big blowout win, Buffalo over Miami. So Joe is hanging by. We'll also touch on the leaders in terms of targets, touches, opportunity, red zone usage, all that stuff in the next segment. We'll bring in Joe here in segment 3, and he'll hang out with us for a couple segments as we break down everything from week 2. Last night was awesome. Again, another fantastic primetime game. Baltimore and Kansas City. It was super entertaining. Who has the ball last, most likely going to win, and CEH puts it on the ground. And just the stones from Harbaugh. Of course, like, he asks Lamar Jackson, are we going for it? Lamar, are we going for this? Do you want to go for this? Dude's going to say yes. Obviously, anytime a quarterback coach, or just a coach in general, asks the quarterback if he wants to go for it, the answer is going to be yes. Why would you give the ball back to Patrick Mahomes? Why would you do it? You wouldn't. So that was a huge takeaway for me. Not a big one, actually, but Lamar getting past Mahomes and company. He hasn't been able to win that game against the Chiefs, and they didn't do it throwing the football, which is something that a lot of people in this industry have been talking. When I say this industry, just football industry, not so much fantasy, just in general. How can Baltimore take the next step and beat Kansas City? They drafted Rashad Bateman. We've yet to see him. You want them to be able to sling the ball around the field, and if they're going to get into a shootout, which they did last night with the Chiefs, can they keep up? And they proved that they could by running the rock and running it really well again. Tyson Williams had a strong game. Latavius Murray finds the end zone again, a red zone rushing attempt that he converted for a touchdown. Marquise Brown shows up, and Sammy Watkins was able to get a few targets again. Not a spectacular day from Watkins. He had a couple drops yet again. He had some in week 1. But I thought he looked okay, and he'll pop up, on the waiver wire when we touch on waiver wire rankings. But there's not a lot from the running back position. Wide receiver is super deep, and there's a few guys out there that are definitely available that could certainly help you out. So let's just run through a couple news and notes and a few of my takeaways before we get into some touches and targets leaders. So there's a lot of injuries here to run through. Darrell Henderson, ribs, he left in the third quarter and didn't come back. Sony Michel got all the work and looked decent. And that's why I'm saying that Sony Michel will probably be one of the most added backs. Or, again, you may not ever feel comfortable playing Sony Michel, especially when Henderson is 100%, but this is a running back that you should just have on your bench at least. The Rams are an amazing team. The offensive line is good. They're going to score points. They're 2-0 here. And that if Michel could fall into double-digit carries, it will, first of all, if Henderson misses significant time or a couple weeks, Michel is an RB2. Whether you believe in the skill set or the talent or not, he's an RB2 based on pure volume and opportunity on a high-powered offense that's going to score some points. So Michel should be owned. Deontay Johnson was like the second last play of the game yesterday, and he suffers a knee injury, and this has bothered him now dating back to last season. But another game with double-digit targets. He's just such a monster in this receiving core. He's the one consistent wideout that you can feel good about in Pittsburgh. So it's another game, at least double-digit targets now in 12 of his past 15. Jarvis Landry's dealing with a sprained MCL. Looks like he's going to miss some time. Odell Beckham Jr. didn't play. I believe he didn't play because they were heavy favorites at home against the Texans. And at times, I think I sweated that one out just a little bit as I had them in Survivor, but they were able to pull through. And I think we'll see OBJ return in week 3. But this is an opportunity maybe for somebody else to step up inside this offense. It's like 3 tight ends there that I just don't feel like you can feel great about rostering, like a Hooper or an Njoku or a Bryant. But maybe we'll see a little bit more from Donovan Peoples-Jones. Anthony Schwartz was somebody that I liked in week 1, but the playing time, the snaps, and the routes were Donovan Peoples-Jones ahead of Schwartz in those categories. Laviska Shenault, he's going for an MRI, scheduled to have one anyways. And the part of this show doing it when we are is that we really won't hear news from some of these players until maybe the show's just over, and then we hear the news. But Laviska Shenault, shoulder injury. My takeaway from the Jags is that, one, they're awful, right? And that's not a huge takeaway. We all knew this. Trevor Lawrence hasn't looked great. We can, we look at his game and you watch some throws just look like a rookie, but also at the same time, I don't want to fault him too much because there's a reason the Jags had the first overall pick, and they're on the clock right now to have the first overall pick next year. The offensive line is not great. DJ Chark didn't show up yesterday. Marvin Jones shows up again. Another game where he finishes inside the top 10 in terms of targets, and he finds the end zone. The volume and the opportunity at least going to be there for those 2 wide receivers, especially if Shenault misses some time here. And James Robinson at least played the majority of the snaps and was getting some usage as he had last year. It's a similar usage rate compared to what he got last season, but still nowhere near what he got last season, where he was just the guy. Carlos Hyde is still hanging around, but he didn't really have a ton of usage in that game. But if Shenault does miss some time, Chark and Jones, just on pure volume and opportunity alone, will be solid wide receiver 3s. I like Jones more. I've always liked Jones more. I think he's the guy. But DJ Chark is going to have some boomer bust weeks as well. Boom in week 1 and bust in week 2. A lot of quarterbacks here. Andy Dalton, knee injury. Initial exams, according to Ian Rappaport, says no ACL tear or damage to his MCL, but I do feel like it is Justin Fields' time. He threw the pick, but he also had a touchdown. He iced the game with his legs, which is something that he could do. And then Allen Robinson didn't do him any favors in an end zone target that he dropped. Normally would haul in. But Justin Fields, we have this conversation with Joe, but I view him as a top 12 quarterback based on his rushing upside alone. And, uptick for Allen Robinson, uptick for Donald Mooney. I know Cole Kmet had a down game. He had a good game in week 1, a stinker in week 2. I still believe in him. Not as somebody that you can feel great about starting in a 12-team league with just 1 tight end, but I still think, he's going to have a breakout campaign. Tua Tagovailoa, he got rocked. Brissett got rocked. The offensive line is not great in Miami. Dealing with a ribs injury. I think it's just multiple ribs, bruised ribs is what I'm hearing. Again, no official word just yet. These guys are headed for tests, more tests here today. Will Fuller was the big news heading into the weekend, is that he was inactive. And then when asked questions when he would return, Flores, just head coach of Miami, kind of avoided it and didn't really, paraphrasing here, didn't know when he would be back. And I don't want to speculate, but there's some reports out of Miami that, he could potentially retire. So it's not good for anybody in Miami. Gaskin hasn't looked good. Parker's going to get some volume and opportunity for sure. And we'll talk about him in a little bit. He is sub 50% owned. I was surprised about that. Maybe it was just because Will Fuller, people expected Fuller to be back and take some targets away. And then Jalen Waddle, we got the over in his 3.5 grabs and over 44 receiving yards. It was the exact same week 1. We'll see if it's going to be a 3.5 and 40-ish again. And I would just take the over on that every time. But he's a guy that's going to get, more opportunity here. But the quarterback play is not going to be great, and the offensive line is not good either. Carson Wentz is dealing with not 1, 2 ankle injuries, sprains. He left yesterday. Frank Reich said he wanted to get back in the game late, and he just said no chance. We'll keep an eye on that situation. But Jacob Eason is not great for this offense. Tyrod Taylor, hamstring, already ruled out for this Thursday's game against Carolina. Deshaun Watson, don't even think about it. They already said he's not playing. He's not going to be active this week. So it is Davis Mills time. I think the only player you want to start inside this offense is Brandon Cooks. Again, another strong performance from Cooks. And then all these San Fran injuries, Trey Sermon, concussion, Elijah Mitchell, shoulder, although he came back, but he hurt his shoulder going for a touchdown near the 4. He got right at the 1. He got smacked, then he left. And then JaMycal Hasty, who I thought looked pretty good. I mean, none of these backs looked great. Sermon had his first touch, 5 minutes left in the game, and then took a nasty hit. It's like a triple whammy. He took a hit, 2 headshots, and then when he fell on his head as well. And then Mitchell leaves with the shoulder injury, and then Hasty leaves with the ankle injury. You know, it's a tough run defense in Philadelphia. I think we saw that in week 1. You're seeing it in week 2. We've seen it in years prior. And for Hasty, I thought he looked pretty good, to be honest with you. You know, he had a few catches and he ran really strong. But Mitchell is you could feel good about, I don't know about spending 100% of your fab, but you could feel good about maybe him just being on your roster as 2 straight weeks now inside the top 10 in rushing opportunities. My big takeaway, we'll get more thoughts with Joe when he gets in here. Las Vegas Raiders are 2-0. They're 2-0. Derek Carr leads the league in passing yards and passing attempts. They beat 2 really strong defenses, 2 teams that I think a lot of people think are AFC contenders, Super Bowl contenders, Baltimore, Pittsburgh. I don't know. But they're certainly playoff contenders to make some noise. And the Raiders are 2-0, beating those 2 teams. They went into Pittsburgh yesterday and looked pretty decent. These are the games from Carr over the last 6. 382, 4. These are yards. 382, 435, 317, 336, 316, 381. That's 361 yards per game over his last 6 completed. There was a game towards the end of last season where he didn't complete it. He was taken out of that game. I think a concussion and Mariota took over. But interesting stuff right there. And Raiders number 1 in air yards per game. Okay. All right. Las Vegas. One quick break. We'll talk about the touches and targets leaders, and then we'll bring in Joe Pisapia. Mean Streets continues right here on Game Plus Network. Keep her locked. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney here with you. Joe Pisapia of Fantasy Pros is stopping by after this segment. We'll get his thoughts on week 2 and hit up the waiver wire. I just wanted to run through some touches and target leaders. And now week in and week out, it's going to be the studs up at the top, but we'll roll through them anyways here. Let's start with running backs. You see, you have the carries, the rushing attempts, and then beside that is the overall touches. So Derrick Henry, what a monster game. All of a sudden, he's RB1. People are having concerns after 1 week. Now, he found the end zone 3 times, but 35 carries, 41 touches. I think the biggest thing for me is that this guy has 10 targets and 9 catches through 2 weeks. He caught all 6 of his targets yesterday. I don't know if this is something that's going to continue here, but certainly he is on pace to have a career year when it comes to targets. And the Titans are so brutal defensively that they want to have Henry on the field to just, there was a couple just dink and dunks and, just, all right, they're going to give Henry 7 yards in the middle of the field. I'm going to throw it to him and we'll continue to move the chains. And I saw that yesterday as well. 55 receiving yards. CMC always going to be up at the top here. He had a touchdown. He has 29 touches. Dalvin Cook, same thing. He left a little, there was a moment where he left and, Cook always seems like he's hurt, but he seems to always come back. Tough dude. And he's always going to be in the top 5 here. Same with Montgomery. Joe Mixon, another game with 20 carries on the ground, 21 opportunities, only 69 rushing yards, though. Not so nice. Elijah Mitchell, talked about him just in the last segment, and another game where he finishes inside the top 10 in attempts. Tough matchup. The numbers aren't great overall, 42 rushing yards and 11 receiving yards, but he did get some goal line work. He just couldn't get in. Ezekiel Elliott, a much better game from him. We'll talk about Tony Pollard in a little bit. Damian Harris, more on him in a bit, but Damian Harris, to me, big takeaway. He just looked real strong on that touchdown run. He's going to be inside the top 10 in rushing attempts. You can bank on it. But James White stealing a few carries inside the 10 from him. Jonathan Taylor, not a great game overall, only 51 rushing yards and 2 receiving yards. I was dead wrong about Taylor his receiving yard prop. I thought that he would rack up at least 15 receiving yards from check down Wentz, and we just didn't see it. Wentz was pushing the ball to some of his wide receivers. Mark Ingram, another week in here, but again, just didn't do anything with it, right? 14 carries, 15 touches overall, 41 rushing yards, -1 receiving yards. Over to the wide receivers. Brennan Cooks up at the top in terms of targets, 14. He reeled in 9 of them for 78 yards, has a touchdown. Terry McLaurin in the tough spot. A lot of questions. Should I start Terry? Should I start Terry? Always start Terry McLaurin. Better offense, I think. Good offense as opposed to good defense. Like, offense will win if you have great route runners like Terry McLaurin. Bradbury's a great corner, and, he schooled him a couple times. Michael Pittman, I may have to take the L on this. Last week I said you can't trust Michael Pittman in your starting roster. I don't know if you can without Carson Wentz this week, if it is Eason, but a great game for Michael Pittman. 12 targets, 8 grabs, 123 yards. Deontay Johnson, the 12 targets, again, double digit in 12 of his past 14. 9 catches, 105 yards. Cortland Sutton, hello, Cortland Sutton. Okay, all right. 9 catches, 159 yards. First one without Jerry Jeudy. A massive game for Sutton. Cooper Kupp, this guy is just going to be an absolute beast. If I had to re-rank wide receivers the rest of the season, this guy is certain inside my top 10. 11 targets, 9 grabs, 163 yards. He has 2 touchdowns. Now he's wide receiver 2 on the season with 3 touchdowns, 278 yards, and he is 5th in targets. Tyler Lockett, I tweeted earlier that it just, we talked about it on this show, and Tyler Lockett just, I don't know, no real respect on draft day. On average, getting drafted as wide receiver 19 outside the top 45 picks, and DK Metcalf is a guy I like. Sure, a little bit more consistency in DK Metcalf's game, but getting drafted as a top 6, 7, at least 8 wide receiver, a top 20 pick for sure. These guys were basically neck and neck last year in fantasy points per game. I think Lockett had maybe 0.9 fewer points per game, but he had more targets, more grabs. DK had the more yards. But Tyler Lockett, like, this guy, wide receiver 1 already, 8 catches, 178 yards. When I watch Seattle, I just see Lockett is the first read. He gets softer matchups. He's in the slot. He's so creative with his route running. He's explosive after the catch. It's nothing against DK. These guys just should be neck and neck. They should have been neck and neck in ADP. ADP is silly. We can throw it out the window. Why draft DK Metcalf in the second when you can get Lockett in the 4th? Hindsight. DJ Moore, big game. He's the man in Carolina. He is the man. Some concerns about Robbie Anderson. We want Terrace Marshall to take the step forward. It'll probably take some time, but DJ Moore, 8 catches for 79 yards and a touchdown. Metcalf is in here as well. 11 targets, 6 grabs, 53 yards. And then Marvin Jones, another week with Marvin Jones in there. 6 grabs, 55 yards, and a touchdown. Here's your target leaders after 2 weeks. CeeDee Lamb up at the top at 24, Amari Cooper 22, Johnson 22, Mike Williams, breakout season for Mike Williams 22. He's had 2 massive games now. Cooper Kupp, Cooks, and Diggs all at 21. Keenan Allen's at 21 as well. Marvin Jones 20. Marvin Jones is going to finish inside the top 15 in targets this season. That's why he's so valuable. He may not catch half of those targets, but he's going to get a lot of opportunity. Debo, another big week, 20 targets for him. Attempt leaders, not a lot breaking here, but Henry is number 1 with 52 on the ground. Mixon 49, CMC 45, Cook 42, Ingram top 5 in rushing attempts. Now, if you want to bet the over on his 9.5 carries, by all means, do it. We had that in the FTM bet tracker, but don't start this guy. Harris 39. It's a big takeaway, right? Damian Harris going to be top 10 in the league in touches on the ground. That is not going to be a big player through the air. Montgomery 36, Mitchell 36, Gibson 33. I know people may have some concerns about Gibson. I'll talk to Joe about that. Taylor 32. Here are your red zone usage leaders after 2 weeks. Of course, Monday Night Football still hasn't happened yet. So some of these guys, there may be a little bit of change in the guard. Taylor up at the top, 8 red zone rushing attempts, 0 total touchdowns. CMC 7, Henry 7, Ingram 7, Henderson 5, Michelle, right? If Michelle steps in for Henderson, it's valuable. He's going to get those touches. Chubb 4, and then a couple quarterbacks in here. Herbert has 4, Allen has 4. Eckler has 4 as well, 17 last season, and then Harris has 4, but no touchdowns. Here's your red zone target leaders. Allen up at the top, Keenan 5, Cooper 5, Godwin 5, Waller 4, Diggs 4, Mike Evans 4, AJ Green 4. If AJ Green is going to be a red zone option for Kyler Murray, I may be intrigued, but Rondell is the guy you want. Kupp with 4, Shepard with 4, and Mike Williams with 4. That's your red zone touches and targets report. We'll do it every week. Again, a lot of the top names will be studs, but I still think there'll be, some takeaways week in and week out, and we'll monitor this as the season goes on to see if some players get scaled back in terms of red zone touches and opportunities, or if they see an increase, because this is where a majority of the touchdowns happen inside the red zone. And by the way, Jacksonville, zero plays in the red zone this season. Zero. Yikes. We'll talk about James Robinson. We'll talk about players that maybe a lot of people are concerned about, but maybe we shouldn't be concerned about. All that and more with the great Joe Pisapia. Keep her locked. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on a Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney and Joe Pisapia with you. Of course, he is the host of all the Fantasy Pros. I say them all, Joe. You're the host of all the Fantasy Pros shows over there, dude. You're killing it. Also the host of Sports Grid. And as you are well aware by now, you should know this, the author of the great Fantasy and Black Book series. What's going on, my man? Thanks for taking the time.
My friend, week 2 is in the books. I think I have some answers on some things and more questions on some other things, but that's the nature of this beast, right? It was certainly a fun week 2 and a lot of exciting games in the afternoon. The afternoon games were outstanding. The 1 o'clocks were, oh, all right, but it was all about those 4 o'clock games, baby. Those were fun games to watch.
They really were. And I see that you have Mahomes. You got a Mahomes Funko behind you. I dig that. He's super fun. I got a Kyler one here over my shoulder. Man, Kyler is just, you talk about the afternoon games. Like, I can't stop watching the Arizona offense. It reminds me like the KC offense. Like, they're just like, they're moving the ball up and down the field. They're looking great. And we're not breaking any news here. Kyler's really good. The offense is going to score a lot of points. Rondell Moore shows up yesterday, and it's a fun offense to watch. But I'll ask you, put you on the spot here. Like, what is your big takeaway from week 2? We're 2 weeks in now. We overreact for some stuff for week 1. What is your big takeaway 2 weeks into the season?
Well, first of all, just with Arizona, you're absolutely right. Kyler Murray's playing out of his mind right now, and Rondell Moore should be the number 1 waiver wire pickup everywhere, because it looks like he's going to have a floor. It looks like he's already integrated into the offense. By all accounts, he's a fantastic dude, so there's no issues there to be concerned about. He's a hardworking kid, but that's certainly one of them. Like right now, if you didn't draft this guy and you didn't pick him up last week, I don't know what to do for you. Like we're trying to yell and scream it from the rooftops. He's going to be a good play for the most part. I think he's a player you want for the rest of your season. I think so far we're looking at is a lot more questions like I was talking about. San Francisco seems like a complete fantasy cluster right now. And that's a situation where I thought maybe we give it another week, have a little bit more patience, see what happens. But I think right now, the frustration level, the injuries, the inefficiencies, all the weird stuff that happened in this second game against Philadelphia, which I know you saw, my friend, being the Eagles fan that you are, a lot of weird stuff in that game. You mentioned about James Robinson talking about no rushes within the red zone for the Jaguars. That's almost a stunning statistic. I can't even fathom that that's true, but it is. And that's kind of the stuff we're into right now. We're into that group of RB2 that got hit so hard with injuries, whether it was Cam Akers, Travis Etienne, J.K. Dobbins, right? All those guys went down pretty quickly here in draft season. And it really kind of killed the tier. And then we all started trying to elevate guys, and then Gus Edwards gets hurt. And I think the teams that hit running back early did well. And I think the teams on the opposite side that didn't reach for RB2 and instead pivoted towards the Cooper Kupps of the world have really gotten out of the gate very well in 2021.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, last year it was Diggs and Keenan Allen and kind of in that third, fourth round that just like they were terrific values. And then this year I'm seeing, you mentioned Kupp and then Lockett. These are guys that Cooks is another one. Just going even later than that. And sometimes he fell like round 4 or 5 just because like I don't want a piece of this Houston offense. But every single week he seems to be there, and it's just 2 weeks in. We'll see what happens to the quarterback with the new quarterback change with Tyrod Taylor not being able to play this week, and we'll see what Mills can do. But he's going to be a guy that gets some volume. Yeah, all those, I'm concerned about Robinson. I guess I feel a little bit better after week 2 that he was at least playing he got a bulk of the snaps, but it's going to be a really bad offense. We know this. The offensive line is not great, and Trevor Lawrence really has looked like a rookie. You mentioned the Eagles game. It was certainly frustrating to watch. Like, Nick Sirianni looked like an experienced head coach. And there was a play where it was like a 91-yard reception from Quez Watkins, and they still weren't able to score. They ran 4 plays. It had some weird crap Philly special thing that just looked like, what are you doing, guys? Like, no. You're on the one here. Like, let's pound it.
It was the opposite of special. Whatever. It was special, all right.
Not
for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, it was special, all right. The Niners backfield is it's going to be a mess. At least Elijah Mitchell had the opportunities, but then he suffered the shoulder injury, and then Sermon finally gets a touch, and his first touch, I mean, it couldn't go any worse. No. Like, he got rocked a couple times, and now he's in concussion protocol. And then JaMychal Hasty, I thought, looked good at times. And then, it's just a guy that's just really sprinkled in here and there. Speaking of the Niners, like, what do you do with Brandon Ayuk? Would you buy low on Ayuk? Would you just forget whatever? If you see him on the wire, maybe you pick him up. But now's not the time, I don't think, to sell. But, like, are you concerned?
Well, I don't think you can sell. I think you have to look. And right now, if you could make that move and pick up Rondell Moore, let's say, or pick up Tim Patrick or somebody like that, you pick them up. I mean, there's been a couple guys that I think we had high expectations for. Ayuk was one of them. I think Callaway was another wide receiver so far. Multiple goose eggs now for Callaway. That's not how we want. That gets you right to the waiver wire, dropped immediately. And I can't say no. I mean, there's probably guys like Darnell Mooney floating around there. There's guys that I think still have upside that we should be looking at and trying to pull off the waiver wire. But Ayuk is in a tough spot. Now, if somebody else drops him in your league, he's worth stashing to see if he does turn things around. But so far, these first 2 weeks have not been good. And, week one is always crazy. We all know that. I think with week two, we're always looking for a little bit more clarity. And you saw things kind of normalize a little bit too. You saw Derrick Henry run the football like Derrick Henry. That was leading them to a win, right? You're going to see that. You're going to see the Buffalo Bills offense and Josh Allen look better. There's things that were going to get better week two that I don't think you had to panic about. But then there's other things too that we never saw coming. Like I don't think anybody thought that Las Vegas Raiders were going to, after that emotional win, go into Pittsburgh, a very tough place to win, and come away with a victory. That I think we're all sitting back trying to figure out. And I don't know if any of us have the answer yet to who are the Raiders.
I was shocked. Like an emotional first win, and then going into Pittsburgh, you got the West Coast going to the East Coast, a 1:00 start, and they won that game. And I got some concerns about the Steelers' offense. I mean, Najee Harris can be fine. I think. I mean, the offensive line is not great, but he's at least playing a ton of snaps and getting all the touches. And you saw the receiving touch, like he's such a threat out of the backfield, and he was able to convert that catch, into a touchdown. And Deontay Johnson's always going to be there in terms of targets. I got a few players here written down that I thought maybe you would have concerns with, and you've already kind of touched on all of them. Like Marquez, I threw in Marquez in there. Claypool I have in here because getting some question about Claypool. Now he's boom or bust. He's a deep threat guy in this offense. But the Raiders being as good as they are, 2-0, beating two solid defenses, and then Pittsburgh, I don't know, just being so-so. Like Ben doesn't have much to offer, really. I'm not saying to drop Claypool, but are you concerned about this offense?
Yeah, I think you have to be, especially whenever we get news today, whatever that Deontay Johnson injury is. It didn't look great at the end of the game. And that was kind of the worst possible scenario there is the last play of the game on a situation where you're not winning the football game to have that guy get hurt. That is difficult. Now, that might help potentially the value of Chase Claypool, but this was always my concern with Claypool from the get-go, which is he was a boomer bust player, and I don't like those guys. I like the guys who get you points every single week, and maybe there's upside for a little bit more. Those are the kind of wide receivers I prefer than the guys who could give you goose eggs, and then the guys who can give you 25. Those guys sometimes really, are very frustrating because sometimes you want to bench them, and then you end up benching them in the week where they end up breaking out, and that is a really difficult thing. I think right now they got to keep trying to get Najee Harris going. I think that's very important. You saw a little bit more of that. I think the touchdown's a good sign for him. But right now, the Pittsburgh Steelers, even though they had that victory in Buffalo, which was very impressive, they came off a little flat, I think, just generally speaking. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just Big Ben maybe is aging, or maybe it's time for a change. I don't know, a little injection of youth. I mean, he was TJ Watt in that game too. That is not good from an emotional standpoint, I think, for the Steelers. I think that kind of hurt them mentally a little bit as a collective. So I think there's a lot to unpack here. And right now, I believe the Steelers and Tomlin will turn things around because that's what they do. But at the same time, from a fantasy perspective, it's been, I think, less than thrilling to open the season. But right now, I think the best thing to do is just hold, because really trading those pieces right now, you're not going to get too much back on the dollar.
No, you're not. And Big Ben, of course, just in classic fashion, is calling out everybody. He was asked about the plays, and he said, "Listen, Matt Canada calls them. He calling out. How could you call out somebody with the last name Canada? I mean, I just don't get it.
That is offensive. I mean, if I were you, I would be in protest for the rest of the day. And and then you got on the other flip side, right? You go look at how pissed off Roethlisberger is, and then you go look at Tom Brady, right? Who's still throwing touchdown passes to Rob Gronkowski. It is fascinating to think that we are here in 2021 and that's still even happening. But it seems like it's happening at like a clip that's almost alarming, like that Tampa might not be able to be stopped by anybody this year. Are you starting to get that feeling?
Yes, absolutely. Are you kidding me? And listening to Tom Brady after the press conference yesterday, I'm just like, this guy is such a damn boss. Like, he is so good, and he just continues to get better and better. And I believe him. Like, he wants to play till he's 50. Fine, we'll take it 1 year at a time, one game at a time. But man, like, if his body can hold up, he's just looking better and better and better. Last year, looking at some of the FTN data, like, he led the league in deep ball passing. Like, he's got all these weapons, and week in and week out, it may be one of the four that has a dud game. It was Mike Evans in week one. It was AB yesterday. Yeah. But him and Gronk look like prime Gronk and Brady in the years that they were winning all those championships. And he said after his presser that when they asked him like how great he feels like after 2 weeks in season 2 with Tampa compared to season 1, they asked the same question to Bruce Arians, and Arians said like light years like he knows the playbook.
Right.
He didn't know the playbook last year.
Mm-hmm.
So he knows the playbook. And Brady just says, yeah, you know what? We're off to a good start, but there's still a lot of areas that we need to improve on. We left a lot of points off the board. And I think if you talk to a lot of people in the organization, like the wide receivers, they would agree with you. And it's like, dude, you have 9 touchdowns in 2
Brady.
games. Your team has like 90 points. But yeah, you're right.
That's what makes him Brady. He's constantly looking ahead and saying, oh, how can we get better? And that's that mentality. And I think that it's not surprising that you see that out of him. What's surprising too is to sit back and think about Gronkowski is basically, I think, a year younger or older, I can't remember, than Travis Kelce. And I think all of us kind of forget that. He's not that old. It's just he was really beaten and abused in that offense. And he had that 1 year off and he's come back refreshed. And now it just seems like we're getting Gronk back from, Gronk 5-6 years ago. And my goodness, what a fantasy value that became if you drafted him late, because you could possibly have maybe the number 3 or 4 tight end and you got him for free. That is a game changer in fantasy if you have Gronk right now.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll talk about, some waiver wire pickups. But since we're on Gronk, like, where would you rank him? Like, you got the Waller and Kelce. Would you just, Hawkinson maybe 3 because of the volume opportunity, but then we're thinking Gronk. Like, I'd rather have Gronk, and like, I like Pitts. I'm concerned about Atlanta's offense, but heck, just give me Gronk inside that offense, knowing that if he's going to score a touchdown every other week, he's going to finish as a top 5 tight end. Like, I think I'd rather have him than Mark Andrews. In fact, I know that I would rather have him than Mark Andrews. Is he just a top 5 tight end the rest of the way?
I think over Mark Andrews, I can make that argument. Hawkinson's a tough one. Pitts is the tricky one. That's the one where I feel like if I'm a 2-0 team, yeah, I think I'd rather have Kyle Pitts because maybe as the season goes on, he gets better. And then Gronk is older, so maybe you do hit a wall at some point, potentially. I don't know. But what I do know is this: I can't argue against right now. Would you rather even have George Kittle or Gronkowski? With the way that Gronk is just, looks so spry and is such a red zone threat, that's the thing you have to ask yourself. And I don't know, man, it's becoming a really fascinating conversation, that's for sure.
You and I are always on the same page. Kittle is down here too, as concerns that I was going to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
Jake brought it up to me today. I'm not overly concerned, but I know it's just 2 weeks, but he's not even a top.
But he's never been a touchdown guy either.
Now.
I don't understand.
Never.
Kittle's a great football player, but great football players in fantasy is not always the overlap. And people sometimes forget that.
Yeah, you're spot on. Plus, San Fran just, with all their running backs, it's what they want to do is run the rock, and it's very clear that they want to do that. Joe, we'll take a quick break and we'll visit the waiver wire. It's slim pickings. We'll talk wide receivers first because there's at least a few more appealing wideouts that you can grab, and maybe it is time to just cut certain guys like Marquez Callaway for some of the players that we're going to talk about. So don't go anywhere. Joe and I will return here on Mean Streets. Keep her locked. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney and Joe Pisapia. Joe Pisapia 17, and we are going to talk a little waiver wire stuff here. There's not a ton of big names here, especially running backs. Let's just start with wideouts, Joe. And I have just sub 50% ownership. I've really kind of scanned all over the place. Fantrax, Yahoo. Fantrax a little bit. The ownerships are up a little bit more because you can, spend actual real bucks on drafts over there. But Yahoo, ESPN, NFL.com, like no disrespect to NFL.com, but some of these guys are like 0% owned over there. Devontae Parker, surprise, again, sub 50. I got Rondell Moore there at 2. I don't know who'd rather have, Parker, Moore. I think maybe probably shoot for the upside and Moore. Darnell Mooney's on this list, Tim Patrick, Henry Ruggs, Elijah Moore, KJ Osborne, Zach Pascal. We're getting deep now with Pascal. Who knows if it's going to be Eason, but he has showed up here in 2 straight games to start the season. Donovan Peoples-Jones is also on this list because it looks like Landry could potentially miss some time. I think OBJ just sat because the fact that they were playing the Texans and they were double-digit favorites. And then Sammy Watkins is in here too. There's a few deeper names, probably some better stashes like Terrace Marshall is one. But what do you make of this list? You kind of just touched on Rondell Moore earlier, but it just seems like a guy that, last week we said that he was a great stash. You got to have him, especially he's linked to Kyler. He could be the number 2 in this offense. I was surprised to see such a great game already, but now I feel like, you know what? Maybe I'll just start this guy as a flex if Kyler in Arizona is going to put up 30 plus points week in and week out.
I don't know why you wouldn't, considering
Yeah.
that it looks like the volume's there, the playmaking ability's there, and the quarterback plays there. And that's the thing, I don't even think it's close between him and Parker if you have that number 1 waiver wire claim, because you don't know what the quarterback situation is. What is Tua's health right now? We're still trying to figure that out. But even so, I mean, what is the upside of Tua versus Kyler Murray? It's not in the same universe right now. So number 1, it's got to be Rondell Moore. The other guy too that I want to talk about is Cordero Patterson, because this is a fascinating piece. I don't know what he is. Is he a running back? Is he a wide receiver? I don't think any of us know. I don't even know where he qualifies now in some leagues. I don't know how we're going to go forward with this, but I guess as a flex play, it's about touches. And this coming week, he plays the Giants. And I think we've got to sit back and say, all right, if I'm desperate for some points, desperate for some volume, it seems like they want to get Cordero Patterson the football. And you know what? I don't think they're wrong, because he looks sharp doing it. And if you recall years ago, this was a huge can't miss, incredible player, great speed, all this playmaking ability, and he failed miserably in Minnesota, right? And then he kind of bounced around. The Patriots got a hold of him, tried to do some things with him. The Bears had some moments. And then all of a sudden, he's got to change his body type over the years, too. And it's kind of fascinating to see what he is right now. And right now, he's a guy that's touching the football, and he's a guy that can score you some fantasy points. So I think I would put him 2nd overall. Tim Patrick, I think you probably put him somewhere around, 3rd in terms of the wide receivers for me. I think KJ Osborne's a fascinating guy. Another player you and I were talking about before on the break, which is you see it in the first week and you go, okay, that's probably one of these weird one-offs. And then you see it again and you start to wonder, oh my goodness, maybe this is more of a thing. And you were right. They are starting to run some more 3 wide sets. And that's probably because with a lack of tight end really in this offense now, it's probably the best format. And it seems like Kirk Cousins kind of thriving with that, actually. Kirk Cousins wants to throw the football. Let's be honest. Every quarterback wants to throw the football. They don't want to turn around and hand to the guy behind them if they can avoid it. But there's some fascinating guys out there. The running back situation, I think, is a little tougher. But wide receiver this week, there's a lot of names that I think you could pick up. You could plug and play. And I think there's even some upside here with some of these plays. And, going back to Rondell Moore, too, a lot of people will look for A.J. Green, I think, because they'll recognize the name. And I would still push towards Rondell Moore. And here's why. If you watch that game, there were still some moments there with A.J. Green where he dropped the football, passes that should have been hauled in. Some of the same stuff, and I would say, in a kind way, the deterioration of a player who's getting older. You saw some of that last year, certainly in spades with the Bengals. And I think this year, even though Kyler Murray's there and it's going to be fun and Green's going to have some moments, I think the touchdown kind of, in a way for A.J. Green, kind of masks some of the negative things that had happened in that game too. So it would still be more. So don't be fooled, for me anyway, at least, by the big name on the board.
I agree, 100%. Yeah, AJ had a couple when I was going over some red zone usage, just some targets and touches, and he did have. I mean, he's got 4, which I think is inside the top 10. But it's Rondell for sure. I've never seen that as well. The same things that you just talked about is he does look like a little slower. Unfortunately, I mean, he had a great stretch where he was just flat out awesome, and just injuries have really slowed him down, and he just doesn't seem like the same kind of wide receiver. And him and Kirk will just have moments, right? And I think there'll just be more consistency with Rondell. KJ Osborne, I mean, 15 targets, 12 grabs, 167 yards in 2 games. And Cousins went his way. Most of that, well, that's 2 games, but most of his usage in week 2 was right off the hop. It was almost like, you know what? This guy is going to be a part of our offense. And you hear all the time that coaches just have at least the first half, like it's just game script, and they know what they're going to do with their first couple drives. And that to me was very telling that in the opening drive for Minnesota, it was like heavy KJ Osborne. It's like, okay, this guy is actually going to be a thing inside this offense. His ownership is 2% in Yahoo. So clearly nobody believed in week one. And, I'm not going to say that I believed either, but I just needed to see it again. And I saw it again right away. Ruggs, would you sell, or would you just like, you know what, this could be a breakout?
It very well could be the breakout. Next week, they're going to play Miami, which typically speaking, depending on which corners matches up where, I mean, Miami defensively is a pretty good team. Now, of course, they just got destroyed by the Buffalo Bills, but that's nothing new. I mean, they've been a good defensive team for 2 years, and they still get destroyed by the Buffalo Bills on an annual basis, a biannual basis, if you will. So it's going to be difficult, I think, maybe for the defense this week, because if there is a miss of time, you would imagine that maybe they're on the field a little bit more. So I think you can play Ruggs. You can go after him. I still think Ruggs is a little bit boom or bust, but I think you ride the wave right now. That's the thing. It is really difficult, especially early on. You want to be smart with the waiver wire dollars. We all do. But you also don't want to miss the wave, because if Osborne, if Ruggs and these guys do pop, and you want them on your roster. And I think what you do is you look at the guys who are not performing. You look at, the Marquez Callaways, you look at some of the other players that you might have drafted that you thought had upside, and it's just not really happening. It's okay to make those moves. It's even okay if you drafted a Brandon Ayuk and you are 0-2, and Rondale Moore or KJ Osborne or Tim Patrick, somebody out there, and you think they can help you win this week. That's okay. It's okay to make that move. And I think I heard you earlier on the show talking about, you got to release ADP. ADP is a great thing to, keep in your mind. But once you're in the season, you kind of push that off to the side, and you look at your record and you look at your matchups, and you try to make the best decisions there, because you only have a finite number of weeks in which to win.
Exactly. I mean, dude, that's like well said. Like, it's perfect, because some people just, they don't want to cut those guys that they like, that they drafted, and it'll hurt you in the long run and week by week, right? If you're 0-2, like, it's not desperate times, but you need a W, and you can't be holding some of these guys who are just not part of their offense. So for a guy like Osborne, who has 15 targets, he's currently a top 20 wide receiver. Whether you believe he's going to finish as a top 35, it just doesn't matter. He's getting more opportunity with Jameis Winston, and I was looking at air yards. Oakland, Vegas is number one, dead last the Niners, and second worst is the Saints. I mean, they're not pushing the ball down the field. They're not throwing the ball.
And Jimmy G has never been a good thrower of the football. I'm sorry. It's just that he is not in that same class. He was a project. They took him on in New England, and you saw enough of him when he played for the Patriots. You kind of knew who he was, and he had a great run a couple of years ago. And they got to a Super Bowl with a great defense, and everything was clicking, and they were kind of new, and then people kind of caught on a little bit. But yeah, I mean, they're a quick slant team. That's all. They are 5-10 yard passes at the most. They are not a team that's going to push the ball downfield, and that's going to be a problem for them, I think, off and on all year. And that's why the Trey Lance stock is a tenuous one right now, because as long as they keep winning football games and Jimmy G stays healthy, where does Trey Lance take over? When does he take over? Does he need to take over? It seems like Fields has a clear path right now. And you look at right now, could you believe that we're here and, you've got Mac Jones starting week one, and which again didn't surprise me, but Mac Jones starting week one. And on top of that, you're still waiting for Fields to make a start, still waiting for Lance to make a start. I still think they're going to get one more week of Andy Dalton because of what's on the schedule ahead of them next. And then after that, I think it's in week 4, they play the Lions. And to me, that's where you circle in a big red circle where Justin Fields makes his debut against the Lions. It's a perfect matchup for him because it's going to be a confidence builder one. But next week, it's a tougher matchup on paper. So if they can get Andy Dalton out there and tape it up and go play, I think they're going to try to do that.
Yeah, I would agree. As much as I want Lance, I just don't think it's going to happen this season unless, an injury happens or they start losing games in San Fran. They're 2-0 with Jimmy G.
Cleveland, by the way, right. Just remember, Cleveland. It's another tough out. That Cleveland defense is for real. So that's who Andy Dalton and the Bears are playing next week.
It is. Quick break. We only got about 2 minutes, and we're just going to talk a lot about Tony Pollard. We're going to give the floor to Joe Pisapia and share his love for Mr. Pollard. So one more segment with Joe. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney and Joe Pisapia. He's with us for another 3 minutes or so. I got some running back rankings. Listen, it's slim pickings. It's tough. I mean, get yourself an RB in your drafts moving forward. Like, grab somebody in the first round and then figure it out later. I don't know. James White is up at the top here. Just I feel like he's always disrespected, Joe. In a full-point league, sure. Tony Pollard, J.D. McKissick, another guy like White. It seems like he's clearly going to be involved in this offense. 2-minute drills. He stole a red zone rushing attempt from Gibson, and, he's just going to be a guy that catches balls on third down. Michael Carter, get him now while you can, even if that offense is going to stink. I got Patterson in here because who the heck knows if he's a running back or a wide receiver. He's RB wide receiver in Yahoo. He's RB only ESPN. Zach Moss, JaMychal Hasty, Kenneth Gainwell, Ty Johnson, Alexander Madison. Yes, I told you, it's slim pickings. Mm-hmm. But Pollard, dude, you were on this guy in the offseason, and you know what? He's looking pretty good. What do you think?
And the offense looks better when he's there. I think that's the biggest thing that I think is triggering a lot of people is the offense when Tony Pollard's on the field seems way more explosive than when Zeke is on the field. And it's not that Zeke can't still be an RB1. He is. It's just whether or not he was a top 5 guy, whether or not he was the safest guy on the board. And 6 years into the league, a guy who, has had some great moments, but that offensive line is not the same. The quarterback has really progressed and developed. So the offense was going to be different. So that's the thing. Like going into this year, there was a lot more risk with Zeke than people realized. And even me, the guy who was constantly saying, there's a lot more risk here, beware of Zeke. I started going to myself, well, I should listen to myself a little bit, and I should start drafting Tony Pollard everywhere. And then I would say the last 3 weeks of preseason where we were, into draft season, I started doing just that. And let me tell you, I started him in a lot of leagues this past week because I had to. And I think those who did were pleasantly surprised. And going forward, Pollard's role is not going away in this offense.
No, and he's just, we've seen, two-headed monsters in backfields where you were able to start both. I mean, Ingram and Kamara comes to mind. This could be a similar situation where you just roll them out as a flex and, away you go. I agree. I mean, Pollard looks pretty good. I think, a great buy in Dynasty if you can find a way to pluck him from a team. It's just maybe a team that's, nowhere in it already after 2 weeks. Teams that sell, all the time in Dynasty. So Pollard on this list. Saquon obviously is rostered everywhere. Got 30 seconds or so, Joe. You buying Saquon?
I buy him because probably you can get him for cheap. And if you look at the schedule, it gets better. You had to know going into this year, 2 games in basically 6 days was going to be very difficult. 5 days at that. So you knew it was going to be hard for him, but it gets the Falcons. He gets the Cowboys coming up. The schedule gets better. I would buy.
All right. Joe Pisapia is 17 on the Twitter machine. Make sure you're checking out all the shows. Fantastic stuff. I love just being able to talk football with you, dude. We used to do this like every single day. So it's nice that we're able to catch up and kind of just talk all things NFL related. Good luck, dude. Good luck with all the shows.
I love you, brother. I'll see you on my show next week.
I hope so. Yes, that's right. Actually, I am. I'm already locked in. You can catch me with Joe. But check out all the work over at Fantasy Pros and, of course, on Sports Grid on Sundays as well. We have some picks. Monday Night Football, Packers and Lions. We got some props for you. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Mean Streets. One final segment here on Game Plus Network. I got some props for you. The props have been okay here to start the season. 12 units. I wish 20 units. Oh, my goodness. We got 12.91 units, 17.41 overall. Devontae Adams over 84.5 receiving yards. This is too low. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is basically perfect after coming off a loss. I think we're going to see definitely see Green Bay score some points. Aaron Jones, 67.5 rushing yards. This was the second worst rush defense in the NFL last season, and we saw rookie Elijah Mitchell have over 100 yards. Jones has a big day here today. Hawkinson over 4.5 grabs. It's a little juiced up, but I like it. Maybe you can get into a same-game parlay. And then we got DeAndre Swift over 4.5 catches is plus money, and to have over 28.5 receiving yards. And then Jamal Williams over 2.5 catches as well. Green Bay allowed the 8th most catches to running backs last season and the 3rd most receiving yards per game. All the volume, all the opportunity for those two backs and Hawkinson. We have a whole lot more over at ftmbets.com. Enjoy the game. We'll be back tomorrow. Cheers.